All right, Alyssa, get yourself set up.
All right.
Romeo, come here, buddy. All right, everybody, as promised, on every Tuesday and Thursday, we're going to go live at noon with another animal adventure. And this week, we're going to actually feature our Bactrian Camels on the property. And the first one you're going to meet today, his name is Romeo. And Romeo is now, I think, approaching about, I believe it's 8 to 10 weeks in age. So he's definitely a younger Bactrian camel because they get much, much larger. And before we go into so much about the species in general, we're actually going to back up and break it down by the species because, believe it or not, there are two different species of Bactrian camels. You have your domestic Bactrian camels, which would make up about 2 million in population numbers. Then you have the wild Bactrian camel, which is critically endangered. Now, I believe it's the London Zoological Society is working with their program EDGE to conserve them in their natural environment. Now, that natural environment is isolated to the Gobi Desert. There's about 4 little pockets where those animals are found, and there's only about 1,000 of them left in the wild. So it's truly a troubling issue. And what's making that a problem? It's encroachment on natural habitat. There's the donkeys. It's also hunting, and then also fighting for resources. Resources are very scarce in that environment, which is hindering the population itself. Now, why is it two separate species? Reason being is that the genetic makeup, believe it or not, is about 3% different between the wild and the domestic Bactrian camel, and that is just enough to make them two separate species for their listing as a species. So now let's get back to Bactrian camels as a whole. Like we told you, they're native to the Gobi deserts, also the Karakum deserts, and they're found generally in the Asian continent. Now, the domestic Bactrian camels, as we told you, are the ones you're going to see more often in captive management programs. And, of course, the Bactrian camel is your camels with 2 humps. Now, these 2 humps are always a level of debate and questioning by people because everyone thinks they're filled with what? Water. But they're actually filled with fat. They're a fat reserve because in that harsh environment where they come from, those fat reserves are what keep these animals alive when conditions are not favorable and resources are obsolete. Now, that fat, of course, is naturally a food source to help sustain and keep them going, but they also have the ability to take that fat, there's our coon pigs, they have the ability to take those fat reserves and actually turn and burn that into moisture. And that's what allows our camels to go up to about a month on end without drinking a drop of water. Now, our domestic camels, our domestic Bactrian camels, they really can't consume anything other than nice potable water. But believe it or not, the wild population is capable of drinking some of that salty, brackish water. Whether or not they can get a sustainable amount of moisture from that is still up for debate. However, they can consume it if need be. Now, in that natural environment, we told you it's very harsh and always resources aren't as plentiful as they should be, but that's the story of a camel's life. They're equipped to deal with hardships. Going back just briefly to touch on that natural environment, it is made up of the arid deserts. It's made of rocky outcrops and quite often stony plains. Now, you'll find a lot of Bactrian camels gathered at the base of the mountains because that is always a source of moisture for them, source of water. Now, in the warmer months, naturally spring-fed areas will provide some area for them to get some of that moisture they need. And there's Allie in the barn with our baby Watusi. That's Romeo's buddy.
Oh, Allie, I'm giving him a wave.
So, what I was getting at is that at the base of these mountains, there are natural springs that allow them to get moisture that they need. But again, in the winter months, when the snow is flying there, because it does get very cold in addition to being warm at times, this is one of the few mammals on Earth that can actually get their moisture from eating snow. Now, naturally, the coldness of that snow, they have to consume small amounts of it at a time to make sure they don't drop their body temperature to a dangerous level. But when in scarce times, they can consume that and keep themselves happy and obviously alive. Now, other neat adaptations, I'm going to try to bring him back out here for you. All right, come on, Romeo, let's go, bud. You want to bring Maverick out too? Come on, Dave. Come on. Stop. One more try, buddy boy. Let's go. We'll let them stay out of the rain if they want. So anyway, where we're going is now some of the adaptations that they have, and maybe this is a good time to transfer up to our adults. Now, they're not fully adults yet. I guess you'd call these guys juveniles. They're yearlings at this point in time, and it's going to give you a much better picture of what they're going to look like as they get older. They're a little bit more erect humps that are full of those fatty reserves, and right now they're going through an interesting process, which is their shedding process, which we'll talk about when we get up there. So Alyssa, who's filming today, I'll meet you up there.
Okay. Absolutely. Got some treats happening today.
All right. So here we are with a little bit bigger examples of Bactrian camels. Now we'll try to get them here so you can get them in the image. See those big fatty humps? Oh, that's right, boys. Girls, get your fill. Very good. Now talk to you from here. How about that? So these guys are about a year old now. These are our yearling Bactrian camels, and we have Gobi, obviously for the Gobi Desert, and Kara, his mate, for the Karakum Desert. Now, going back to some of those adaptations and physical characteristics, and I mentioned to you the shedding. In their natural environment, it can go down to negative 40 degrees Celsius for prolonged periods of time. As much as they're equipped to deal with the heat, they're also equipped to deal with that cold. Now, when Bactrian camels shed out, they shed out in big groupings, just like this, and it falls right off, and it looks like a very poorly or roughly shorn sheep. So right now they're in that shed, and this has been falling off pretty much the past week here. In another week, they'll definitely be fully shed out and more ready for our warmer temperatures that are supposed to be coming at some point soon. So going back to adaptations, real quick, if we look down at their feet, it's a little muddy and wet down there today, but the feet, you'll see that they're a split-toed animal, an even-toed ungulate. Now that big, wide foot actually allows them to better displace their weight on the sand, which makes it much easier for them to walk on that sandy environment. The more surface area you have, the more spread out you are, the easier mode of transport. Now, moving up a little bit, obviously we see their knees. Their knees have these little calluses. Our guys are starting to form them. And even under the chest, they have a small chest plate. Those callus over, so when they do lay down in that hot sand, it protects them. It's just like you wearing flip-flops at the beach to protect your feet. Going up a little further from there, we can talk about this nose. Now, their nostrils, they're one of the animals that can actually seal their nose shut, just like that. And the reason for that is, again, if the sand kicks up during a sandstorm, it's going to prevent any of that debris from blowing into their nasal cavity. Now, if you look at these beautiful long eyelashes, ladies, be jealous, all right? Those beautiful long eyelashes do the same thing. It prevents a lot of that sand and debris from blowing into their eyes and, again, protecting them when conditions are not ideal and the sand is flying. Now, how big do they get? I told you these guys are yearlings. When fully mature, they average anywhere from about 5 feet 9 inches up to about 7.5 to 8 feet tall. The average height of a fatty hump is going to be around that 7-foot mark. Now, how much do they weigh? These guys are actually the largest land mammal of their area or territory, and actually the largest of all the camelid species. These guys can easily obtain a ton, which is 2,000 pounds and above, reaching 2,200 to 2,500 pounds. Mind you, our males are going to be a lot stockier than our females, and they have a very short, well, I won't call it short, but I guess very stout, large presence when they are full grown. Now, trying to think here what else we can briefly touch on about these guys. Kara and Gobi came to us this year. They're new to us at the park, and we're actually happy to have them in addition to our dromedary camels. Now, our dromedary camels we have at the park are Max and Remy, or Remington, and you'll be introduced to them probably in a few weeks when we do a segment on them. Now, easy ways to remember which camel is which. When you spell Bactrian camel with a letter B has 2 humps for the 2-hump camel. When you spell dromedary with the letter D, 1 hump for the 1-hump camel, the dromedary camel. And I guess one last thing, we're out of carrots here. One last thing we can talk about is their family grouping now that we're mentioning dromedary camels. The camelid family consists of dromedary camels, which are 1-humpers, our Bactrian camels are double humpers, but it also includes llamas, alpacas, guanacos, and vicuñas, I believe it is. They all make up that family. And one characteristic that's very neat, how do you know they're a member of that family? Look at that big split lip. Nice job, right on cue. That big split lip here, all the members of that camelid family share that unique trait. So if you're ever at Animal Adventure or another animal park walking around and meeting many new familiar faces that might kind of look the same, see if they have that split lip and you'll know it's a cousin of our Bactrian camels. So on that note, guys, we're going to leave you today. We're going to hope the sun comes back out eventually. And remember, check out the London Zoological Society and their efforts with their program EDGE. They're one of the organizations that is actually working to preserve and conserve the Bactrian camel and its natural environment there in the Gobi Desert. So thank you guys. Tune in again on Thursday at noon, and we'll bring you another animal from Animal Adventure.